Good morning. My name is Melissa A. Kotulski, Judge Kotulski, earning my way there through the sweat of my brow and the support of my nation as well as those in the global context. I'm here today to talk about a couple of things pertaining to Russia and the United States. Recently, Russia and the United States both stood at the helm of the International Court of Justice, a great triumphant moment that the US and Russia was not able to fully celebrate with both of their communities, not just within their nations, but worldwide, due to the strife that came with the tenure of the Russian judge's position after serving alongside one of us. I have embraced Russian culture, Russian constitutionalism, the narrative of Russia being involved with the United States. And I hope also all of those derivations thereof and interactions thereof that come from Russia, whether they were an umbrella company to or an umbrella country to them, like Romania or Ukraine or the Czech Republic, or whether they directly were ruling over those nations, their oblasts and okrugs and things of that nature within the actual Russian Federation. I have embraced it because I think it's imperative that we as a nation work together to build bridges to look beyond just what's happening on this earth, but work with what's happening beyond this earth. Which is why I often honor Rureshatin, who is an amazing international scholar who had a focus in space law. And leading up to his tenure at the International Court of Justice, that space law thing was one of our major tenets here in the US in terms of a nice foot race between the Russians and my nation's peoples. So, what I would like to do is quickly just consider that tenure at the court and pay homage and honor to that tenure. I have a more intention or more focused review coming, and that will be posted eventually, probably on SSRN, concerning a comparative analysis of the two nations as they stood at the helm, both as president with Joan Donahue and vice president with Kirill Gevorgian. So, what I'd like to do quickly is review the cases that they had during that tenure. And while there has been a proliferation of filings, there was not that many cases that came through in terms of opinions and judgments. However, the ones that did are very telling in some ways, but also give a good nod to both nations as what they have done to contribute to the world community, a community that I hope works with us to celebrate their goodwill around the world and allow for moments like that International Court of Justice presidency of a United States American woman sitting at the helm as president alongside a vice president from Russia. So, what I'd like to do, as I said, is kind of consider those cases in some. I have a more intensive review coming, as I've already mentioned. But the cases that they've considered were from Qatar and UAE, racial discrimination, Kenya and Somalia, maritime delimitation, Chile and Bolivia, status and use of waters, the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Uganda, armed activities. Nicaragua and Colombia, they had two cases. They had sovereign rights in maritime spaces, along with relative allegations in terms of what was happening in the Caribbean. We also had the continental shelf dispute with those two nations. Finally, of course, was Ukraine and Russia, which probably was instrumental for ensuring that Russia passed the baton with its seat to the Romanians at the court. The subject matter, which is, I think, although discordant for both parties because it's difficult to relinquish control, but as Russia showed in the 90s, they relinquished control in a manner that allowed for those to have their own voice as Romanians, but also acknowledge the attribution and influences that come from the great nation of Russia, which, although an adversary to mine, a competitor, I hope, not as adversarial as it could be or has been, as we work towards more peaceful relations. So I also wanted to make note of the judges that were under the tenure or there during that time. There were about 25 judges that had been interacting with Judge Kevorkian and Judge Donahue. Um, and there were about 10 or so judges ad hoc, inclusive of two Russians that were interacting with the Gevorgian team. Also, interestingly, an Italian that was helping with the Ukrainian case. Also, there were two registrars. So these two judges coming together from a deep history and heritage of international law and international jurisprudence under the helm with these folks around them, inclusive of individuals from Uganda, individuals from China, Japan, India, many other nations. Serbia, he's pretty much the long-standing one right now, Mr. Tomka, who I've received a card from in the past. We also have Abraham, who's an interesting amalgamation of Egyptian background with the French background, at least as presented to me. So these two nations came together in a great celebration with these other judges around them, elected into power, hopefully democratically of sorts, parliamentarianish of sorts, through the General Assembly, which I got to tell you, it's a hard forum to get to, even in my shoes. And I got a pair of life-size strides that rock the house. Um, so those are, and then in terms of the topics that have been considered or were considered by those two judges as they stood at the helm during a great celebration of what was once a real alliance turned into an adversarial foot race in terms of lots of things that were happening on the world stage, inclusive of space relations, in part culminating with Vereshchatin's beautiful presentation about space law at the United Nations. These are the topics that they continued considered race, not race to the space, but race in terms of how us folks are interacting with each other 2,000 plus years after some people would say is the rise of their Christ. Now, that's the race that we focused on, which of course has tendrils of what else is going on. And it is important, by all means. Qatar, Russia, Ukraine, UAE, they all needed to consider that race stuff. Terrorism, obviously something that has been really an instrumental consideration on the world stage, at least since the 70s, although arguably going back at least to World War One, if not further, um, with the assassination of that particular um, diplomat that led to the inception of the war. Other things that they considered while they were at at the helm was water boundaries. Kenya, Somalia, Nicaragua, and Colombia all considered water boundaries, which are instrumental for analysis of how states interact with each other on the world stage. Use of waters, how water is used, traversed, commercial activity, also sovereign rights and armed activities, and finally, that continental shelf delimitation that I spoke of. So, those are the things that were considered while they were at the helm. What did the world talk about? Of something that was hugely important, the strife that was happening between Ukraine and Russia. And while I don't begrudge Romania's amazing Oruscu, he's amazing. He's done some great things in the international legal world. He really made it there. All that fighting with Ukraine led to Romania becoming the judge instead of the Ukrainians. And I got to say, our Ukrainian sisters and brothers are doing amazing with amazing stuff with international law, at least as presenting. Probably some of our Americans help out. I think Harold Koch comes to the table now and then and gets things done. But I'm just saying, because of that strife, because of all that infighting in Eastern Europe, guess who won the race to become judge? Thank you for listening. I'm very happy that we had these two amazing leaders from both nations come together in a peaceful manner to resolve disputes pacifically in a way that emulates all humanity for all time and all posterity in a way that perhaps has never been done before. And really, I hope serves as an example as to how to bring things together when two nations may be competing for supremacy but also can be buddies doing it along the way. Oh, I didn't get the whole thing, did I? You are really